too as well. Fantastic. Thank you for getting that all recorded. We will be recording the session, so we'll be sharing it with participants after the session is over. So feel free to take notes now or come back later and listen in again. But let's see, I just want to talk a little bit about what we've got going on today. So usually Celine from our team, the lovely Celine, is up here hosting, but she has somehow handed over the power to me today to host. So fabulous to be with you all. Celine will be holding it down in the chat, fielding any questions that come in. Of course, probably dropping some great resources for everybody to click into should you so desire. And any questions that you've got as Jordana is presenting, feel free to drop them in the chat, drop them in the Q&A, and we will address them at the close of her presentation. And then just to close out the hour, as we wrap up, I'm going to do a quick dive into MemoryFox, just a quick little 5-minute high-level overview for anybody who's not familiar with MemoryFox, and just talk about some highlights of our platform and how it can help enhance your storytelling objectives. So today we're going to talk about how growing your organization depends on clear and consistent messaging. And that really all begins with alignment internally. So if you've ever been here at this place, I'm sure many of you have, working towards alignment within your organization, you probably know how that feels. You know it can have some of its own challenges, but you know that it can also present opportunities to help you really have clear communications to then fuel some great public-facing stories. And beyond just being so excited for this topic today, I absolutely admire the woman who we have with us to present on it. I respect all that she has to share in this arena as really her field of expertise. And so I would like to very warmly welcome Jordana Merkin, one of our MemoryFox partners. She is the founder of Voice for Good, mission-driven marketing. And she started Voice for Good after 10 years herself as an in-house nonprofit marketer. And so the great thing about Jordana is she brings her insider knowledge and her outsider perspective to help growing nonprofits raise awareness and funds through the strategic marketing and communications that she works with them on. So she really partners with organizations that don't have their in-house marketing staff. She works a lot with smaller to mid-sized organizations, but who still have a very big voice to share. And she partners with these organizations to help share their stories more effectively. Most recently, Jordana is a founding member of the We Are for Books book club for nonprofits, and I have the distinct pleasure of helping co-host along with two of our other nonprofit friends this book club alongside her. So it's special for me to every quarter share a club screen with her, but even more special now to be able to share space with her and have her on our MemoryFox webinar series. So Jordana, with that, I'm going to hand it over to you. Take it away.
Thank you so much. Let me just share my screen here. Okay, so can we all see?
Looks great.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. Okay, so let's dive in. Thank you so much, Natalie, for that introduction. It's been really exciting to partner with you more often recently, and I'm really excited to be here today. So as Natalie said, I'm Jordana Merkin. I'm the founder and CEO of Voice for Good. And today we're going to discuss creating an internal culture of storytelling that fuels external growth. It's really at the heart of all of my work, and something I'm so passionate about, and I'm really looking forward to discussing with all of you here today. So just a bit about me, as Natalie said, I've worked in and around nonprofits my entire career, first in-house for a decade, wearing all of the nonprofit marketing communications hats at a few different organizations. And for the past 3 years, I've shifted gears to working with organizations as a consultant. In college, it was an English major. And so, what do you do with that? I also minored in creative writing and sociology. And I I realized at that point that I really wanted to make mass communication individual and personal, and use the words that matter most to do that. And I started to do it in the for-profit world. I did a few internships in advertising, and I quickly realized that I enjoyed that way of thinking, and that type of work, but I needed to be marketing a mission. So for my first full-time job out of college, I started a nonprofit, and I haven't turned back. Through Voice for Good, I equip growing nonprofits with the tools and knowledge to clarify their messaging and plan their marketing to connect with those who matter most to their cause. Together, we work on the right words and stories to connect to the right people at the right time, which matters both internally and externally, as we'll discuss. And I grew up in northern New Jersey, right outside New York City, and I live here again now with my husband and 3 kids. So shout out to anyone from this area. But in our virtual world, I'm proud to have worked with organizations all over the country, and I'm looking forward to being here with all of you today. So stories are important, right? And if you're here, you likely believe this already. But I want you to know why they really matter, and I don't want you to just take my word for it. Chip Heath is a Stanford professor who co-wrote the book Made to Stick. In it, he writes about an experiment that he does in his classroom where he asks his students to give 1-minute speeches about crime patterns in the United States. And then after listening to several speeches, he asks them to write down everything they can remember. Though they've just heard them a few minutes before, only 5% remember any individual statistic. 63% remember the stories. Stories move us. They connect us to other like-minded people. Stories are what stick. So we want to be building that culture of storytelling so everyone understands this, and everyone understands the importance of it and how we can all use it to grow. So now that we know why stories are important, I want to be clear on why it's important that everyone know how to tell them and how to collect them. I know that no one is looking to add another job function to their role, but what we're talking about is not really additional work for anyone. It's an internal culture shift to make it clear that really everyone is a marketer. As Seth Godin says in his book, All Marketers Are Liars, which is a great book with a title that I hope you won't hold against me, marketing equals storytelling. I just want to be clear that every touch point, both internally and externally, is a chance to build trust with the organization and to build a relationship person to person. And that's what marketing is really all about. So everything an organization does supports that story. Today, I want you to swap out the word marketing for storytelling as we move forward and we'll think about how that works. So what does storytelling do for your team? There are 2 types of stories we're going to focus on today. A big picture story that tells the story of your work as a whole, and day-to-day stories, which are probably the ones you think of when you think about nonprofit marketing. But before we get to specifics, I want to focus for 1 more minute on why it's so important to have a clear sense of storytelling internally. A strong marketing plan, which we now know equals a strong storytelling plan, supports organizational goals. It's beneficial across all areas. So it attracts volunteers. It attracts donors. It attracts program participants. Whatever the goals are, it helps with that. So it's how we connect person to person. So whatever area of the organization you are in, you will benefit from that established culture of storytelling. It's also a reminder that your work matters. We all have frustrating or difficult days, but one of my favorite things about working in and with nonprofits is that ultimately your work is driven by your mission. And if you have stories that can help you remember your why, it helps you keep your eye on the prize and feel good about your work. And similarly, it's valuable for retaining your team members and attracting the right new ones, and turning those team members into ambassadors when they can clearly share your messaging with others. So I want to be clear what I mean by messaging. A key part of what I work with my nonprofit partners is a messaging guide. It's an internal document that informs all of your communications, and it's the basis for telling your stories. It describes clearly what you do, who you do it for, why you do it, who you're talking to, and how to talk about it. How to tell your stories and connect with the people who want to hear them. Clear messaging is key to connecting both internally and externally. So when I start with a messaging guide, I always start here. What do you do? If there isn't a clear and cohesive answer to what do you do for your organization, you're going to lose people. So I'm wondering if we can put in the chat, if like on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being like, we're all on the same page, and 1 being, I don't think we'd all answer this the same way. If you asked everyone at your organization, including your board members, like all of those involved, what would you do? Would they give the same answer? Make sure I can see the chat. So, everything I see. So somewhere in between, right? Okay. Seen a lot of 3s, which is a great place to start. And if you're lower than that, then that's okay too. And we're all here to learn. So if you ask that question of 3 different people at the same organization, you might get 3 different answers. And that happens often. So if you're at the low end of 0 to 5 or somewhere in the middle, that's okay. Often we work in silos, and while there is a time and place to answer about your work as an individual, of course, more often being asked, what do you do, is an opportunity to share the impact of your organization as a whole, to tell that story. And it's an opportunity you really don't want to miss. So you want everyone on the team to be equipped with an answer to this question so they can effectively spread the word about your organization. When that happens, your speech bubbles end up looking like this. You end up telling one clear story that demonstrates your impact with a cohesive message. And the more cohesive that message, the more aligned you are internally, the louder and clearer your voice will be amplified externally, which is how you'll grow. So as I said, there are 2 types of stories that we'll talk about today. The first is your big picture story. It's the underlying reason for why your work matters, and it's how you engage your people with the emotional core of your impact. That's both your internal people and your external people. Your internal people need to know how to answer with your big picture story to engage your external people. So when someone says, what do you do? Your big picture story is really how you want to be answering that question. So the way that we approach a big picture story is we start with the question, what do you do? And we peel back the layers of that onion. So we do an exercise called the 3 whys. So we ask, why is that important? 3 times at least, to really dig deeper and understand what that big picture story is all about. So I'll give you an example of one of the organizations that I work with. It's a special needs preschool. And so when we started this exercise, what do you do? I got several variations on, we teach children with developmental challenges. And each person answered, how they fill in with that particular answer. But then when we dug deeper, we asked the question once, why is it important? And that's so participants have somewhere to go to school. And why is that important? So they can learn at their own level. And why is that important? So they can reach their potential with a strong foundation for future success, which everyone deserves. That third answer is the big picture story. It should be rooted in your mission and your values and speak to the emotional core of your impact. So they educate children with developmental disabilities so they can reach their potential with a strong foundation for future success, which every child deserves. Everyone may not use this exact language every time they're asked the question, what do you do, right? We're human and we want to sound that way. But when you've established a culture internally in which everyone knows, understands, and connects with that story, it will be easier to repeat that story when asked, what do you do? And build upon that to collect day-to-day stories that support your big picture story. So now we have a sense of the big picture story and how telling that story internally will connect us to external people. So what are day-to-day stories and how do we spot them? They happen around us all the time. They don't have to be completely groundbreaking, though sometimes they will be, but they do have to support your big picture story and speak to that same emotional core. That's how you drive that connection. They also have to have the following elements. You want to be telling a story of one. It's a story of one person at a time, a story of transformation of that one person. And you also want to position your organization so that you're not the hero of the story. Your organization is the guide and the subject is the hero of the story. I don't know if you're familiar with Donald Miller's building a story brand, but that is his model, and it's one that really applies to nonprofit storytelling in particular. So I'll give you an example of a day-to-day story as well from that same special needs preschool. At graduation, Maddie was nervous that her anxiety would get in the way of making friends at her new school. But she said, when I feel nervous, I know what I learned here will help me feel better and make friends. So think about the checklist. It's a big picture story alignment, right? Maddie is reaching her potential and achieving future success, which every child deserves due to attending this program. It's a story of one. It's a story of her transformation. And the school is the guide. Maddie is the hero. So that's how you demonstrate your impact through your stories, and ultimately invite your external people to partner with you to further whatever impact you have on the problem you solve. You want to consider your audience as your partners, but to tell your stories ethically, you especially want to make sure that your storytellers are also your partners. You want to make sure you're telling ethical stories. So don't tell them about someone, tell them with someone. I've worked with many different cause areas in the nonprofit sector, but I've spent a lot of time in the special needs and disabilities communities where nothing about us without us comes up a lot. I'll say that again, nothing about us without us. And it's true for storytelling too. You always want to start with consent before telling a story. You want to invite the storyteller into your process and be transparent about how you plan to share it. You want to focus on the dignity of the whole person, not necessarily just the part of their life that brought them to your organization. You want to give the storyteller a voice in their own story. Don't tell it for them, tell it with them. Again, nothing about us without us. Don't sensationalize or exaggerate. Some of the best stories are not the obviously monumental ones. Think about Maddie and making friends in her school. She hasn't even made friends yet, but the transformation was having the foundation to believe that she could. Avoid perpetuating harmful stereotypes around those you serve, and consider what language to use and not to use. And my first job out of college was at the National Down Syndrome Society. And on my first day there, my supervisor explained to me how we speak about people with Down syndrome and how we don't. In that community, person first language is super important. So it's a person with Down syndrome rather than a Down syndrome person. So often the words we don't say speak louder than the ones we do. And that's something to consider for your mission as well. Remember, above all, that no one owes you anything. Even if your organization did change their life completely for the better, they don't owe you their story. If you consider these, not only will you be sharing a more ethical story, but it will be more authentic this way, which will connect you further on that emotional level with your people, both internally and externally. You'll also be bringing everyone together internally and allay any fears that anyone you serve will be exploited. Sometimes program-facing staff, front-facing program staff are hesitant to share stories or make introductions with marketing and fundraising staff because they're not sure how these stories will be used. So having these ethical storytelling guidelines in place and building that internal culture of storytelling will also address any internal resistance to storytelling and instead reinforce that you're all on the same page working toward the same goals. So now that we've discussed why stories are so important and how to tell them, what else can you do to shift your internal culture of storytelling? So you want to pay attention to all sources. As we've said, stories can come from anywhere. Stories also don't only come from those you serve. Stories of transformation can come from your board members, your staff, your volunteers, and your donors too. This gives your external people a well-rounded perspective on who is involved with your organization and how being involved has shaped them for the better. You also want to share stories from all angles regularly at meetings. And this applies to organizations at all sizes. I work with mostly smaller organizations. So even if it's just a couple of people sitting at a table and that's what your meeting is, or sitting in the Zoom room, you still want to be sharing these stories so that everyone internally hears about stories from outside of their immediate day-to-day and understands that they're worthy of sharing, even if they don't seem like a big deal. Remember that story about Maddie? I overheard that story. At graduation, I heard one of the teachers talking to one of the therapists about this sweet thing that one of the students said. And I was like, were you not going to tell me about that? But it was sweet to them. But, from their perspective, it didn't seem like anyone would care. But from my perspective, people care. Stories, even seemingly small ones, have a broader appeal than you think. Stories lift all of us up and connect us to the importance of our work. And they are how we connect externally too, which is why it's important to have a story bank. At graduation that day, I didn't have a way in mind to use Maddie's story yet, and that's okay. Not only should you share these stories internally, but you should record them internally too, so you have a way to share them when you're ready. And I know MemoryFox can help with that. I'm sure Natalie will mention. But even if it's just a shared Google folder or whatever it is you use internally, make sure there's a place to store these so you can use them in your external communications later. And we will get to that in a bit. In that same folder, you also want to keep your word bank, which is something I also build into every messaging guide. As I said, words matter, and the words that resonate with your people should be something that you write down. So sometimes, and as I said, sometimes more importantly, the ones that you don't want to use are important. So if you do have a word bank and or a messaging guide, keep all of it in the same folder so that everyone can reference it. All of these steps together will build a strong culture of storytelling and the systems to keep it functioning and growing. So as I mentioned earlier, another important part of a messaging guide is who you're talking to. So this is where we shift from your internal culture of storytelling to using it to fuel that external growth. And to do that, you need to understand your audience. So right now I'm referencing audience in the singular, but please note that you likely have more than one. Your beneficiaries and supporters may be two different groups. Your mission may appeal to more than one generation of people. Your volunteer group may look different than your donors. And it's important to consider that in your communications. And we'll talk about that more. But right now, we're going to talk about audience as anyone who consumes your stories. So that's your email subscribers, your social media followers, your website visitors, those on your mailing list. And for all of them, you need to get a sense of who they are in order to connect with them. So that's who they are demographically, right? Their age, their identifying gender, their stage of life, where they live. But more importantly, you want to think about their psychographics. That's who they are as people. What do they believe in? What makes them tick? What are their values? What makes them feel good about giving to your mission? When thinking about that, there are a few quotes that you can attribute to truly everyone, but I believe that this is one of them. Everyone has said this in one way or another at one time or another, and this is the golden rule of communication. Show me you know me. People want to feel seen and heard. And the more they feel you are connecting with them personally, the more engaged they'll be with your organization and the more they'll want to invest in their relationship with your mission. It's not just about the stories you want to tell them. It's about the stories that they feel speak to them for who they are. So that's how you make the shift from, oh, that's a beautiful story to, oh, that's a beautiful story that speaks to who I am and I want to get involved. In all of your messaging and communications, you need to consider what the recipient wants to hear and not just what you want to tell them. This is true internally as well as externally. And through your stories, you want to signal to your audience that they're in the right place. To do that, you want to clearly demonstrate your values through your stories. Leaning into your values signals that your people are in the right place and that they should stay there. As Seth Godin says, people like us do things like this. People make decisions that align with the kind of person they are or the kind of person they see themselves as being, and they do the types of things that that person would do. If they see supporting your mission in line with that, they will continue to stay involved. If they can't see your values and your messaging and your stories, they won't. Your stories signal to your audience that they're in the right place and want to stay connected. If not, they'll move on to another organization that feels more in alignment with people like them. So think back to Maddie. If you're speaking to an audience that believes in seeing all kids of all abilities succeed, then sharing examples of that through your storytelling will draw them in and keep them engaged. And you could tweak it further depending on exactly who you're speaking to in that moment. But the more you know about your audience in general, the more you can tell your story in a way that relates to them and makes them feel seen. The better you can do that, the more they'll think, people like me care about values like this. People like me support organizations like this. Again, don't assume that even the smallest stories only have internal appeal. When there's a values alignment, there's external interest as well. As you build your culture of storytelling, you'll find that you'll start spotting stories everywhere. And even that unexpected moments can be an opportunity to put your values first stories out to connect with your people. I saw a great example of this recently from One Simple Wish, which is an organization that grants wishes to children in foster care. I have not worked with them personally, but their communication is amazing and they are worth following. When a media placement that they were very excited about took a turn, they told their story in an email and on social media. I'm just going to read an excerpt from their email. They said, yesterday we were supposed to be in Los Angeles filming a national talk show. Unfortunately, the day before we were set to fly across the country, we had our first call with the producer, and we were told that the narrative we had agreed to had completely changed. We were crushed. They went on to explain that the producers wanted to focus more on the foster care experience of their guests and they were comfortable with, and also that the celebrity guest that they would be in conversation with during the segment was an actor who retweets a controversial figure who is known to make transphobic remarks and tout what they believe to be dangerous conspiracy theories. So they passed on the opportunity to do the show. And while that would have been a big story internally for sure, they took the opportunity to share it with their people. They turned to their community and created a moment of emotional connection. Leading with their values, they may have lost out on the huge daytime talk show opportunity, but they shared a vulnerable internal moment that yielded amazing external results. The comments on the post were wholly positive and many wishes were granted as a result. When you tell your stories on an emotional and values-driven level, it works because you're connecting person to person. You're showing your community that people like them do things like this. So while we're on the topic of your people, I want to take a minute to break your audience down further. How do we get in front of new people is a question I get a lot. And while that's an important piece of marketing, I always encourage starting from within. So whether that's an audience of 50,000 people or 50 people, there's a lot of value to engaging those already in your audience. And here's why. In your existing audience, let's say we can break that down further to those who have not made a gift and those who have. The first group in your existing audience is those who have not made a gift yet, but they're already in your orbit. They're people who have signed up for your newsletter. They're your social media followers, your volunteers, or maybe they've attended a program. The know, like, trust funnel is a concept from the for-profit world that reflects how consumers do business. Awareness isn't enough. Someone has to like and then trust the brand to become a customer. In the for-profit world, the same is true for donors. And in some ways, we're up against more because unfortunately, there is already a level of distrust against nonprofits. So when you focus on sharing stories with your existing audience, they already know you and they probably even like you, even if they haven't donated. They like you enough to have followed you or to have given you access to their inbox with an email address, which is no small thing. Certainly if they volunteered or come to a program, etc. So rather than building the relationship from scratch, you're starting at step 2 and you're that much closer to ongoing involvement. On the donor side, I want to share these 2 stats, which is that under 20% of new donors will return to make another gift, and about 60% of repeat donors make another gift. So that first stat is staggering, right? We all know how hard we work for each donation, and then over 80% of those donors will never return. So why would we not focus our energy and attention on those people, right? And sharing stories with these donors in particular to keep them engaged. So if you can keep your donors engaged between their first and second gifts, they are so much more likely to return. So this is also an important group not to overlook in terms of story collection. You can ask donors for stories in addition to telling them stories. Immediately after making a donation is a great time to ask, why did you donate to our organization? And use that as a jumping off point to build a relationship and hear their story. A follow-up thank you email is also a good time to ask again for their story. Again, you want to consider show me you know me. When you thank them for their gift, if you can, acknowledge the particular campaign or story that they reacted to, if you're able to do that, and ask why it resonated. Invite them in to hear their story and connect on your shared emotional core and values. This is a great way to add stories to your bank while building relationships with your supporters, which will yield both future gifts and future stories. Leading with the emotional core of your issue and your values will connect you to your people, both those already in your orbit and signal to new people that they're in the right place. But what about when another organization also shares your values? Because there are many that will, with over 1.8 million nonprofits in the United States alone. There are going to be other organizations that have similar missions and similar values. So how do you tell your stories in a way that stands out? It's not just what you say, it's how you say it. The voice, tone, and style you use is critical to keeping your people engaged with your stories and your message while signaling to new people as well. Your voice should be consistent for your organization. It's your organization's personality. It's who you are when you show up for your audience. People give to people, so it's important to sound like an actual person, even when you're representing the organization as a whole. Your tone is your approach or attitude in each communication. So it can vary the same way it would for a human. You're not going to sound the same if you're talking about an issue that you're angry about, or an issue that you're thrilled about. But you generally want to have a few different tones that are consistent with your voice. Your style is your visual identity. It's what people typically think about when they think about brand. So it's your logo, your fonts, your colors, but it's also in your writing itself. Are there certain words that you always capitalize, consistently on purpose, or, certain words you spell incorrectly on purpose, again, consistently, slang or insider language that you use? All of this contributes to signaling to your audience that they're in the right place. Yeah. Again, show them you know them through your communications. So as an example, we'll take two organizations with similar missions around cancer. So I know this slide has a lot of text, so I'm just going to read them out. So nonprofit A is, we're on a mission to free the world from cancer. Until we do, we'll be funding and conducting research, sharing expert information, supporting patients, and spreading the word about prevention. Also, you can live longer and better. Nonprofit B is, our mission is to fight cancer by raising awareness and to educate about prevention and early cancer detection. Our goal is to ultimately put an end to late-stage cancer diagnosis. We look to enrich the lives of those fighting cancer by offering them special VIP experiences that will bring them hope, inspiration, and courage. So they have similar missions and similar values. Both are about information and prevention. Both are about improving the lives of patients. They both value education and both value well-being and dignity. But if you look closely, they're telling different big picture stories through the words that they use. Nonprofit A uses free the world from cancer, research, expert support, live longer and better. Nonprofit B uses fight cancer twice, prevention, put an end, and also hope, inspiration, and courage. There are subtle differences and there is some overlap, but their voice, tone, and style, as you'll see, make a big difference in signaling to their very different audiences. Nonprofit A is on the left, nonprofit B is on the right. And while it may have been subtle in their missions, their logos and the copy underneath were taken directly from their respective homepages. And their website and social media overall reflect their individual voice, tone, and style. Your organization has a unique story and a unique voice. And leaning into yours will signal to your audience that they're in the right place, that people like them support organizations like yours. And you may be thinking, but what about everyone else? Am I excluding people by not using broader language that invites everyone in? Everyone should care about my mission. And while it's true that you don't want to be so insider that even your own people don't understand you, it's important to remember that if you're trying to speak to everyone, you're going to end up weakening your message and ultimately speak to no one. So though there are people for every mission, your organization is not for everyone. It's for the right people for you. And using clear messaging to tell your stories will help you find them and keep them engaged. If you run a dog rescue, don't focus on the cat people. They're not your people. This is not to say that everyone needs to have personally experienced the problem you solve to feel connected, but the more you can lean into the emotional connection, your values, and your voice, tone, and style in your stories, the more you'll attract your people to your mission. So let's talk about how to do that externally. When I talk about content, I mean everything you produce that is audience facing. So it's the stories you're going to tell in written form, in video form, through photos. It's going to be on your website, through your email, snail mail, social media, all of the things. So no matter what the communication, it's important to remember that sharing your stories is not just about you. Show me you know me, right? What do they want to see in their inboxes or in their feed? What's going to get them to stop the scroll or open that email? Think about the value you provide. Your audience needs to feel something about everything you put out there. So with every communication, the first step is to consider your audience, especially if there's more than one. You want to personalize and segment your lists as much as you can. So, of course, there are limitations to this, but to the extent that you can say, hi, Jordana, instead of hi, friend, you're showing me that you know me that much more. If, to go back to the Maddie example from graduation, if you know that you're speaking to a group of parents, then you can write that as if you're speaking to a group of parents. So it's not just about Maddie and her success, but also about me and how I relate to Maddie and her success. You also want to identify the emotion behind the story. This is where you want to focus on your big picture story. Why does this matter? And use that emotion to connect your audiences to your cause, whether or not they've experienced it personally, and make sure that's threaded through your day-to-day stories too. For example, they may not know what it's like to be hungry, but they know what it's like to feel helpless and not be able to provide for their family. They may not know what it's like to be a survivor of domestic abuse, but they know what it's like to feel scared. So use this fill in the blank for your organization on crafting your communications around stories. They may not know what it's like to blank, but they know what it's like to feel blank. This will help drive that emotional connection around your story. Lastly, this is one of my favorite tricks when introducing a new day-to-day story to those in your orbit already. You need to remind them of your big picture story. So even if they are in your orbit and they know what you do, people need many, many reminders of that. When you're writing to those already connected to you, you don't want to alienate them or bore them by describing it all again every time. But you also need to remind them because people forget and they're busy. So these 3 magic words, as you know, builds that connection while reinforcing this message. It takes you from, at our organization, we're on a mission to provide books to classrooms all over the city, to, as you know, we're on a mission to provide books to classrooms all over the city. You get them nodding along like, oh yeah, I did know that, and establish that connection from the beginning. So again, when you consider the audience, the rest of the story that you share will land much more successfully. So now that we're equipped to tell the right stories to the right people in the right way, let's talk about the right time to tell them. And really, the answer is almost always, right? We almost always want to be sharing a story. But my job is to make communicating with the people who matter most to your cause both more effective and more manageable. So let's break that down. Again, we are not looking to add anything to anyone's already too full plate. So here's a visual about how we tend to think about when to tell stories, at events and campaigns throughout the year. And this is a great way to think about it. A few times a year, we have major events and big fundraising campaigns. And for these, we do want to pull out all the stops. Each event or campaign should be centered around a theme that is consistent with your big picture story. And we want to use day-to-day stories to support that theme. We want to share them across all of our channels to really engage our people, both internally and externally, around these major events and campaigns. Having an internal culture of storytelling will really benefit you in these situations when you have a large library of stories ready to choose from, and where MemoryFox will serve you too. But to truly maximize our internal culture of storytelling to fuel external growth, we need to use the stories in between major events and campaigns as well. You need to show up for your people in between asks during the off season. We want to stay top of mind. So we're not only telling our stories when we want something from our people, and we are maintaining that emotional connection and values alignment throughout the year. As humans, we are hardwired to want to know what happens next. Think about binge watching a TV show or binge listening to a podcast or reading a really good page turner. We don't want to leave our people hanging. So if you can, use this off-season time to share the next chapter of someone's story that you started with at, a major event or campaign. Or you can experiment with long and short form stories or a story told in several installments. Think Humans of New York on Instagram. However you do it, continue to share your stories through your newsletters, in your social media posts, in your thank yous. Send many, many thank yous. And they're always great opportunities for stories. In one-to-one outreach in a consistent way that works for you. And I want to sit with that for a minute because I know this is a lot. And as I said, my role is to make messaging and communications both effective and manageable for small nonprofits. So I want to stress that while showing up consistently is crucial, it is essential that it's planned out in a way that's realistic for you. So let's get strategic about making storytelling work for you by talking about content repurposing. So I get pushback sometimes on content repurposing that it seems lazy or we don't want to be redundant. But I want to push back on that and say, you really do want to be redundant, right? As we've said, people need many, many reminders. You may have heard of the rule of 7, which is that, someone needs to see something 7 times to take action. That rule was started by the film industry almost 100 years ago. So if you think about how much we have thrown at us all the time from all angles every day now, it's more like the rule of 70. So we really want to it benefits our people to be sharing something across channels many times. And often also, because of the way the algorithms work on social media, our audiences are not consuming our content in the way that we are creating our content. But even if they are, it does really benefit them to see it many times. And it benefits you because then you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. So really, content repurposing is a win-win for everybody. So the way that you do it is you start with a piece of long form content. So that's maybe a newsletter that has a lot in it or a video that's a little bit longer. So you start with that and you share it out to people who are already in your orbit. So that can be usually an email. Sometimes it's a printed letter. And you share it out and, for the right communication, you can even start it with, I wanted you to be the first to know. But you let them know that you're sharing this with your community and they're in your community. So they have this insider access. Then you can take that same piece, that same story, and repurpose it to social media. So it will look a little bit different depending on the channel, and it will look a little bit different than your email, but the content and the story can still be the same, and you're sharing it more broadly. And as I said, for those who have seen it, it's a reminder, and it increases that connection. It's, again, a head nod that, oh yeah, I knew that already, and I need to do something about it. And so that helps as well in terms of your audience. Then, as a third step, you can share the same story back to particular segments or individuals. So you can do a mail merge, which goes to a smaller group of people, but looks like an individual email, or you can actually send a personal email, depending on your relationship with the person that you're reaching out to. If it's people on your board, your donors, volunteers, whatever the group looks like, you can text them or pick up the phone and call them or send them a DM, whatever it is. You want to take this moment to reiterate a personal connection with whoever is receiving that communication. And it's okay, even if they've seen it already, you can literally say, I saw this and I hope you'd appreciate it. Or, I think you'll appreciate this message and I just wanted to make sure that you saw it. And if they are already part of your network, if they're already on that insider list, then it will land, right? Because if it's something that they'll actually appreciate and you have that emotion and values-driven connection, then that will generally work. This week, I actually got an email from Walgreens, and the subject line was, we have something you'll appreciate. And I opened it and it was just like a random collection of vitamins and bug spray and other things that I was like, I guess, do I appreciate this? But again, consider the story of one, and use that sparingly. If you're saying, here's something you'll appreciate, make sure that it's someone who will actually appreciate it. And again, if you're connecting on that emotional and values-driven level, not like how Walgreens connects to a customer, then that will land. So I want to close with this because I know we covered a lot in a short amount of time. But if there's one takeaway, it's this: stories are what stick. They are what stick in our minds, and they are what stick us to each other internally and externally. And as I tell everyone I work with, you can't do all the things, and certainly not all at once. So everything we talked about, do what's realistic for you. Implementing even some of what we covered here will yield changes in internal culture and external growth, especially if you can stick with them. See what I did there? And if you need help or have any questions, I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn or Instagram. I also have some free downloads on my website if you want to get started with your own messaging guide or marketing plan, which you can find at voiceforgoodmarketing.com/freebies. You can also sign up for my email list on my website. I send emails a couple of times a month with useful tips and tricks around messaging and how to further connect with your audiences. And that's it. I hope this was helpful to you and your organizations. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Jordana, that was so excellent. I think you just so beautifully wove together really a lot of key pieces around storytelling, especially when it comes to audiences. And so that's audiences that we speak to and that we're sharing our story to, but also audiences that we're pulling story from, and how important it is to tell not just one perspective, not just even one segment of our population's perspective, but story across the board. So thank you for all that. I love the nothing about us without us. That is just an incredible way to think about how are we inclusive of all the voices? How are we being very ethical in our approach to storytelling? It kind of takes me back to when I was doing communications work for a nonprofit, and I was trying to, we had decided to use Giving Tuesday as a day to share gratitude for our donors instead of asking them for more money as we entered the giving season. And I really wanted to tap into some of our grantees that we gave a piece of farm equipment to throughout the year and have them film a little video saying thank you in front of their farm equipment. Thank you for this piece that you helped fund me for. But I was a little like, I felt anxious about asking our members who were so busy as farmers doing their job on the farm day in and day out to actually come back and take the time to film a video on their phone. But what I couldn't believe in the end when so many agreed to participate was not only how our donors felt hearing that thank you message, but it was actually our members that we serve who said overwhelmingly, thank you for the opportunity to say thank you. And so just realizing that storytelling goes beyond just showing the impact, like sharing gratitude with your donors, it actually is also sharing impact with the people that you directly serve. So I think you did a really great job of talking about that. And thank you for all your points. Thank you for the reminder to repurpose content. I absolutely love this great acronym I heard last year, CORE, create once, repurpose everywhere. And I am a big fan of that. And you did a great job of touching on that. So we want to hear from all of you. What questions do you have that, as long as we have Jordana here, what can she help answer in terms of any challenges you're faced with when it comes to storytelling, any ways that you feel like you need to share out in different channels, just anything you struggle with trying to collect the story. Go ahead and type it in the chat, and we'll tap into Jordana's great brain here.
While people think of questions, I just want to, like, Natalie, that story that you gave, like that example that you just gave was so wonderful on so many levels, because it also, one thing I didn't talk about really is how we feel like we're bothering people by over communicating or by asking or by, and it's, if done in the right way, it's really like the biggest compliment. Like, oh, you're not asking me for money. You just want me to tell you how this impacted my life, or you just want to say, you want me to say thank you, or, that kind of a thing. So I love that. That's a wonderful example of how storytelling exactly really benefits everyone.
Yeah, it's really true. And it's giving your community a chance to share something in their own voice in a way that makes them feel seen and heard. And ultimately, that's what community is all about, right? Is engaging people in that way. So that's fantastic. Let's see, Celine just posted in a question here. What is one action step we can all take today to get started telling and gathering better stories? Great question, Celine.
Yeah. I think just establishing that understanding, right, internally of why it matters, because I think that's, when I think of clients that I've worked with, and I did touch on this, that, I think that's the area I get pushed back. Like, why does anyone care about this particular story? And really just broadening what we think of as a, quote unquote, good story, right? It doesn't need to be something that's, completely life-changing. It doesn't need to be something that is so obviously, groundbreaking. It just needs to be something that shows that transformation as a result of that person's interaction with your organization. And that can be a really small change, but it can still be a powerful one. And so I would think, we want to just accept stories from all angles and, broaden that definition of what makes a good story.
And I think that's a really great point you're touching on as well, is because sometimes even starting with the smaller story, just getting people to feel comfortable sharing something really simple, then encourages them to do more of a deeper ask as you move forward in time. So you're right, it doesn't have to be a large ask to begin with, and sometimes we're better served in just starting with something small. So that's fantastic. Danielle's asking here, what's the most important question you would recommend asking your staff to reflect on?
So again, it's broadening that definition of what do they think people would want to hear about, right? Because often it's like, well, why does anyone outside of our organization care about this particular thing? So to do that, you can kind of flip it. And I do ask this question of my clients. It's what's a misconception that people have about your organization? What are you up against when you're trying to craft your messaging? And tell these stories, right? What do people think about your organization? Almost like you're debunking myths about what people think about you. And once you start there, then the stories kind of tend to come out a little bit easier of, oh, well, here's an example of how that's not true. Or here's an example that illustrates, what we're really about. And, internally, that's a helpful exercise to think through, I find.
Yeah, asking a question to spur the question. That's a great point. Shannon asked a question that I know we hear come up often with organizations that have to protect some level of confidentiality with the people that they serve. So she's saying that her organization provides prevention, treatment, and recovery services for people with a substance use disorder. Do you have any tips on collecting stories while preserving confidentiality?
Yeah. So I think transparency is key. I think, above all, you want to start with that. Like when you're first approaching someone to share their story, you make it clear that telling a story anonymously is an option, or using only a first name, or, present several different options to get their comfort level. Because again, it's important to be transparent about how you want to use the stories and also how you're going to collect the stories and what that's going to look like every step of the way. So yeah, it's definitely tricky with some missions like Shannon's to be able to share the stories, but there's always a way to do it. You don't have to be showing someone's face. You don't have to be using someone's name. And I wonder, Natalie, when you walk through MemoryFox, you can speak about this specifically in terms of video, but in general, when you're sharing the story, I think if you put out there that, your goals in sharing the story. Yeah, we're going to use this to collect money so that other people in your situation can be, benefited by our organization. And don't dance around that, right? Like we are going to use this in this way. But of course, we want your permission. We want your partnership, right? You're telling a story with them, not about them. So I think as long as there's that transparency, and, ultimately they may decide, I don't think this is for me. And then you respect that. But I think you'll be much more likely to get that buy-in and to have that partnership in whatever way they're comfortable, even if it is anonymous. And this telling a story anonymously still has a lot of power to it. If you're all, on the same page every step of the way.
Absolutely. Yeah, visual storytelling, of course, is quite compelling, but sometimes a text testimony can be very powerful as well. And so don't discount that. I think also ways that we've seen people have success in maybe protecting that confidentiality, but still showing the impact visually is approaching people that they've served who have since graduated out of a program or moved on and now can look back at their time and reflect on that visually. So there's ways to get around it in the moment of just collecting a great text testimony, but there's also ways to then reach out to people who have moved on and are in a healthier state, and you can then collect their testimony after the fact.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to think about timing also, right? Like right after something has happened or while someone is still going through whatever it is you offer them, might not be the right time.
That's right.
So yeah, again, the same way, it's the storytelling is about relationships every step of the way. So it's about the relationships internally and the relationships with your storytellers and the relationships that you're building through telling your stories. So I would just say start with that as your basis and then go from there.
Yeah, that's great, Jordana. One last question here before we transition. So Talisha's asking, how do we get some of our staff members comfortable with asking our clients for stories? They talk about keeping their clients' info confidential. And so she's asking for some great practices around getting those staff members comfortable making that ask of their clients.
Yeah. So again, it's that reminder of shared goals, right? It's not that, well, I'm looking to exploit this person and you're looking to protect this person. It's right. We're all on the same team. We all want to do this in a way that serves them. And that helps us serve more them, meaning the storytellers, in a way that serves more people. So, whether that's again, like doing it anonymously in writing, or doing it maybe with a voiceover, even if they're, whether or not they're willing to use their voice, or have someone else record their testimony with a voiceover, so you can use it over B-roll of something else. There are ways to do it across all channels. But again, internally, really just assuring everyone that this is going to be done ethically, that again, that no one owes us anything, right? That there's not an assumption that everyone who goes through a program is going to have to tell their story publicly, right? It's certain people with whom you feel you have that relationship to even ask, right? And that's a good way to get more comfortable, right? Think about who are the people that you do have that relationship to ask. And the worst that happens is they say no, right? I don't think the worst that happens is that they sever all ties with your relationship, because if you do it the right way, then you put that out there as an option, right? It's, if you're comfortable with this, if, we would love to have you partner with us on this. It's not, well, we want to tell your story everywhere and it's going to be up to us how it gets told. So, if you say it in that way, then they might say, I'm not really comfortable with that, but they will still appreciate the way that they were approached. So I think just making it clear to your staff members, and you can put all of that, like, as almost like a checklist, like, here are all the things we're going to have, and they can have that with them during the conversation. And I don't think that needs to be a secret either. You can almost share that with the, share that it exists with the person who you're asking the story from. Not that it's anything for them to fill out, just so they know that these ethical storytelling considerations is something that's important to your organization, and that you only want to be telling a story if they're fully on board and comfortable with how it's going to be told.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Jordana, for those thoughts. Thank you for helping us understand how to create that level of comfortability. I think that's really important, and just giving us some of those frameworks to help our staff and our members alike. So I just want to take the last few minutes that we have here as we close out to connect some of those dots on what Jordana has shared to how MemoryFox can maybe help you through our platform to highlight some of these stories and help you curate this very humanized story bank, so that we can approach it from that nothing about us without us standpoint. So I'm just going to share my screen here and show you a little bit about how this works. Here we go. Okay, so quickly, just a little bit of background on MemoryFox. We are based out of Buffalo, New York, and really started as a way to collect story from pre-dementia elderly on family photos before those stories were lost forever. And so the way that it worked, and I'm sorry if my screen's taking a moment to load here, but hopefully it's going to cooperate. The way it worked is you would actually take a picture of a family photograph and then do an audio recording of a grandparent, an older generation, somebody that you wanted to capture that family story from before it was lost forever. And in large part, this happened because Chris Miano, our founder, who was an Army veteran and served in Iraq and Afghanistan, when he came home, his family said, it's really too bad that your grandfather who served in World War II isn't still alive, because you guys would have really benefited from sharing stories of service with each other. And so that was part of the inspiration for Chris to turn this MemoryFox into his business school project. And as he was doing that, goodness, I'm so sorry, you guys, I can't get my screen to share here. I don't know if you can tell me, Jordana, what you're seeing, but at any rate, as he was building this out, a couple of local nonprofits to us in Buffalo said, well, hey, could we use your tool to help us collect story? We are so busy doing the work on the ground day in and day out. We know how important it is to show the impact of the work we're doing, but we are just challenged in collecting it. And so I'm just going to show you guys here. I'm not able to get it into present mode, but that's okay. We'll work with it as it is. So these were the three biggest pain points that those two particular local United Way and a Naval Museum shared with us. And they're still actually the three biggest pain points we hear today. So one, collecting content from our community is like pulling teeth. When we do get content, organizing it can be very frustrating and time consuming. And then three, just needing a more efficient and modern way to share that story out. And so in essence, we built MemoryFox to solve these three problems. We built it to collect, organize, and share storytelling content. And so from a very high level, the way this looks is a tool to collect, organize, and share. And this is the flow of MemoryFox. And the idea is to get you from that collection side to that sharing side as quickly as possible. And so what happens is you're going to create these campaigns that you're able to share out with your community, whoever it is that you're looking to share story from, or collect story from, I should say. And these campaigns are just a simple URL that you share out with your community through a website link or a QR code. And it's going to land them on a very branded, made to look like an extension of your website, guided storytelling journey. And so here you're able to tell them exactly what you want them to share and in what type of setting you want them to share it, while also giving them the privacy to share it from their own space. So as a result, you're going to get a really great piece of user-generated content. You can collect any user data in relation to the person who's sharing the story, any demographic data that's important to you. And there's also an opportunity to collect that consent piece. So anything you legally need to be able to collect to share out their story publicly. And once you collect that content, be it a video, a photo, or a text testimony they want to share, as soon as they submit it off, it's going to automatically populate into your back-end dashboard or story bank, we like to refer to it here. And these are where all the assets live in this content management system for you from the admin side to work with. And so what's really great about this is it's all unified in one place. It kind of solves that very big headache of having photos and videos stored in like a shared drive or in a cloud folder or a Dropbox, for example. And then the testimony or the quote or the caption tied to it in an email, and just constantly living in that state of things being not in alignment, we know can be so frustrating and a bit of a time challenge. So the story bank helps all those assets live together. It kind of organizes everything for you at the point of capture. So everything is tied with the person who submitted it with the caption all in one place. And then what's so great is from here, you can either download it directly to your device and work from it as you need to from your computer, or we've created some great options for you to then be able to share it out. So 2 ways that we help you do that. One is we have what we call story pages. So it's a very simple website builder that allows you to gather some of those video stories or photo stories into a public facing web page that you could just then grab the URL and share it out with the people that you serve or the donors that you're trying to communicate to. You can also embed it into your website if you want it to live directly in your website. And then the second thing that we have to be able to share publicly is our new Canva integration that just launched last year. And so what's really fantastic about this is it directly pulls, once you link your MemoryFox account to your Canva account, all your assets that are collected in MemoryFox automatically pull into that back end side of Canva. Mirrored exactly how they come in your MemoryFox account. So it's very recognizable from an organizational standpoint. And then of course, as everybody knows, because so many of us in the nonprofit world work with Canva on a regular basis, it's just a simple drag and drop into the materials that you're designing there. So that's really the overview of MemoryFox. The biggest thing that we know nonprofits struggle with is how to show the impact of the work that they're doing. And that's important not only from a donor stewardship standpoint, but also from getting increased program participation, or from getting new and attracting and retaining your volunteers, also just from educating the people that you serve. How can we use the video and photo story to then educate the people that we're trying to involve in our mission? So there are so many ways to tell stories, as Jordana alluded to, so many different snippets, so many audiences to collect from and to speak to. And really having a story bank to be able to share some of those snippets is going to be infinitely valuable as we continue on in the mission work that we do day in and day out. So that's a really high level overview of MemoryFox, but if anybody wants to hop on a call just to talk more about your storytelling goals, what your processes currently look like, anything that you're feeling challenged by, and just hope to operate differently, I would be happy to speak with you. Just either shoot me an email, you can scan the QR code here, and that'll take you to my calendar where we can book more time together to talk about your storytelling goals, or feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. So that is really what we've got for you today. Thank you so much for sticking around. Thank you, Jordana, for the really fantastic insights that you had to share. And I just want to say thank you to everybody here who joined us, not only for being here, but really for the important mission-driven work that you all do day in and day out, for the impact that you're making on all the lives that you serve. So thanks again, and we'll see you all for our June rendition of our MemoryFox webinar series. Take care. Have a great week.
Thanks so much.